Good morning. It's Friday and it's time for another Lesson 5 Devotional. I hope you'll forgive me for my voice. My allergies are going crazy. But this morning I wanted to talk to you about setbacks. Uh, in particular, the cycle of events and setbacks in our life. In January, Pastor Paul preached a sermon on taking ground. And Rachel and I wrote down many areas where we wanted to take ground in. And here we are closing in on the end of the year and looking back on those things that we wrote down, and we can see some areas where we've taken ground and we can see some areas where we've lost ground. And in particular, last night I was telling my wife, or yesterday I was telling her, that it seems like we in this one area we've made this advancement and we've come a long ways, but then there's always something that happens that knocks us back a few steps and causes us to have a setback. And I know God has called us to do this one thing, and but yet it seems like when we make that advancement, there's a setback. And last night I was just so discouraged and exhausted from all the effort that's going into this thing that we're called to do. And I was just, man, I was struggling. But I was reminded last night of Nehemiah and how Nehemiah in Nehemiah chapters 3 through 6 experienced that cycle of advance and setback. God had called him to build the walls, and for every advancement he made in building the wall, there was a setback. And it just showed me that in the Christian life there's conflict. In the Christian life there's always opposition, and whenever we are called to do something, we're going to have opposition. The crazy thing is God called Nehemiah to build the walls, but God didn't remove the opposition. He allowed it to still be there. And so when we are working for Jesus, and we're accomplishing things for him, there's going to be opposition. And Nehemiah experienced the same thing that the people building the walls experienced, the same thing that I'm experiencing now: discouragement and exhaustion, and negativity. And in verse 10 we find where they sing this song. They say, the strength of the laborer fails, since there's so much rubble, we will never be able to rebuild the walls. And that was exactly like I was last night. I was speaking these negative things, and Rachel's like, whoa, with the negative words, you're really struggling with this positive word thing. And I was just so discouraged last night and exhausted feeling. And I just, as I was thinking about Nehemiah and these cycles of advance and setbacks, I thought, what did Nehemiah do to overcome this discouragement and this exhaustion and this negative talk? And what we find is that Nehemiah had the people begin to lift their voice in prayer. And so often when we face opposition, our first response shouldn't be to be negative. Our first response shouldn't be to lash out. Our first response shouldn't be to be defensive and want to go into fight mode because of the setback. It shouldn't be discouragement. Our first response should always be prayer. We should always find ourselves in prayer when we're facing opposition. And the reason why that is because prayer reminds us that that God is sovereign and that God is in control. And prayer reminds us to open our hearts to him and place our trust in him, and to acknowledge him as our main scripture verse is trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding, but acknowledge in all your ways, acknowledge him, and he shall direct your paths. There's a reason why God is allowing this opposition come to you. It's a trial. It's a test. It's to see where you trust, what you trust in. Do you trust in yourself, or do you trust in the strength of God? And the test is so that your testimony will be more powerful. God is bringing you through this. You face opposition. You overcome that opposition, and your testimony is powerful. And I look forward to the day that we come through this opposition, when we break through those walls. As I'm talking about walls, we break through those walls of opposition, and we erect those walls of righteousness and strength, and see our testimony be powerful for the Lord. I encourage you this morning to find a place where you can pray and just trust the Lord to help you overcome and the rubbish you see around you. I love you. God bless you. I'll talk to you next week.